So I'm married. I've been married for over 30 years. My wife Tracy is here. My youngest son Isaiah is here. My baby, my little one, is over here with us tonight. And so I've got 3 children. They're all grown. I have 2 grandchildren. And I know it's stunning, right? You're like, dude, what are you talking about? You look so young. I get that all the time. But I do have 2 grandchildren. And so one thing we're going to talk about later on in the weekend is youth and young people and that sort of thing. Since my early 20s, the last couple of years, since my early 20s, I coach youth sports, all sorts of sports for a very long time, and been very involved with youth at camp and church and what have you. And so saying all of that, what I want you to know is that I'm an expert. I am an expert on how to get it wrong. I'm an expert on how to make mistakes. I have made every mistake you can possibly make. If you can mess it up as a father, as a husband, if you can mess it up as a family man, I've done that. I've messed it up. I've made that mistake. I want you to know that. I want you to know that this weekend I'm not coming in here and saying, let me tell you all the answers, and let me tell you everything I say is going to be manna from heaven, and everything is going to be like the light of revelation, and you're never going to. I've made all the mistakes. This weekend we're going to talk a little bit about some things maybe that I've learned over the years. We'll talk about some things I've learned from mistakes. We're going to talk mostly about the Word of God. This is where most of our time is going to be spent, as you would expect. But I really want you to know that I do not come into this weekend as some sort of marriage or parenting expert. The only thing I'm an expert at is getting it wrong and making mistakes and messing it up. And so I just want you to know that, because I'm going to get loud. I'm going to sound like maybe I'm angry or I'm like, really laying it down. I don't mean to come across that way. I love this stuff. I'm passionate about it. It's important. I'm going to talk about it like it's important, but I don't want you to think I'm some sort of a know-it-all. So we clear on that. So somebody comes up to you tomorrow night and says, that guy sounds like a jerk. You can say, no, he's not a jerk. He's just a mess. And there's a big difference between those two. So I just wanted to get that all out of the way. I have been praying for this weekend. Ever since Tony contacted me and I started working on the lessons, I have been praying for this weekend. I hope you have. I've been praying for me in the preparation of it. I've been praying for myself in the delivery of it. I've been praying for you and me in the hearing of it and the application of it. I've been praying for that, and I hope that you have. Because what we're going to talk about throughout this weekend, what we're going to talk about consistently is allowing God to do the work that needs to be done in our homes. That's what we're going to be talking a lot about. Because unless God is in it and unless God is doing it, it's not going to happen. Unless we're praying and asking God to bless what we're doing, unless we're in His Word and receiving His truth, unless we're in the church, the temple of the Holy Spirit, unless we are letting God guide and direct and transform, it's not going to happen. You and I can't try hard enough to get this right. We just can't. It has to come from God. I was reading this morning in Mark chapter 9. You remember the account about the man who brought his son to Jesus who was demon possessed. You remember that? And Jesus wasn't there, and so they asked the disciples to cast the demon out. You remember what happened? They were unable to. And so Jesus cast the demon out. And the disciples later said, why couldn't we cast it out? And Jesus said, this kind can only come out through, does anybody remember, through prayer. Prayer does something that nothing else can do. There is a power in prayer, in asking God to be involved, in asking God to work, to move, to act. There is a power in that is not in anything else. And as long as our attitude is, I'm going to fix it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to try harder, I'm going to work at it, and that's not what's going to do it. God is going to do it, and that'll sort of be our perspective as we go through. So, the theme of the weekend and the topic for tonight is the Christian family. What's up, brother? How you doing, man? The topic for tonight is the Christian family. Now, I want you to put yourself in my place. Imagine that you have been asked to address the topic, the Christian family. What would you do with that? Where would you start? What would be your approach to that theme? What I have decided to do is to begin with the question, what is a Christian? If we want to know what makes a Christian family, we have to know what makes a Christian. And as Christians, as a Christian husband, we'll talk about that, Lord willing, tomorrow night, Christian wife, which I'm terrified about, I'll tell you, Sunday morning, and parenting and young people, also Sunday morning, as we're going to talk about that. If you and I are going to have a Christian family, then our family must be Christians. The question is, what makes a Christian? So the way that I would define a Christian, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about it, I'm going to say it. We're going to break it down into 3 parts, because it's a sermon. Has to have 3 parts. I didn't know it was a lectureship, so I'm glad Tony didn't tell me that. A lectureship is another level. I can't do lectureships. I might be able to preach a sermon. I'm not smart enough to lecture, and so I'm just going to preach if that's okay. But we're going to define it. What is a Christian? And then we're going to break it down into the required 3 points and see what that means to be a Christian. And then we're going to take those 3 things and apply them to the family. So that's where we're going. What is a Christian? Now, what does that have to do with the family? And how does that inform how we do family? I love that TV right there. Is that for March Madness? You just haven't taken that out yet? I wish we had one of those for March Madness. That would be awesome. So, what is a Christian? Turn over to Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians chapter 2. March Madness was terrible for me this year. I'm from Kentucky, and we didn't have a good March Madness, and so I don't want to talk about it anymore, okay? So we're done. We're not going to talk about that anymore. But at least Duke got beat. Am I right? At least Duke got beat. So we're okay. So a Christian is a man or a woman lost in sin, hopeless, helpless, vile, condemned, who has been saved by the grace, love, and mercy of God, who by faith in Jesus has a personal relationship with Him and is daily being transformed into His image. So a Christian is a man or a woman lost in sin, saved, rescued, delivered by the grace of God, the love of God, the mercy of God, by faith entering a personal relationship with Jesus and daily being transformed into His image. Now let's talk about those 3 things. So a Christian is a person who has been saved by the grace, love, and mercy of God. Ephesians 2. Ephesians 2. We're not going to be, it came up this evening at the wonderful meal we had with the Bachmillers. If you have not had her brownies, you need to demand that she make you brownies. Unbelievable. What was I talking about? Oh, so it came up tonight at supper. We'll probably be in Ephesians a lot. We're not going to be in that as much as you would think. We won't be in Ephesians a whole lot this weekend. But I do want to start out in Ephesians tonight. Ephesians chapter 2 says that, and we won't read the whole thing, but we were dead. Ephesians 2:1, dead in trespasses and sins. Dead. No life. No ability to move, to think, to see. Dead in sin. Walking according to the course of the world. Indulging lust and desire. Following happily after Satan. That was our condition. And as a result, under the wrath of God. That's verses 1 to 3. Look at verse 4. What does it say? It doesn't say, but you It doesn't say, then you. It doesn't say, thankfully, you figured it out. Thank goodness you got a clue. Isn't it great that you, it doesn't say that. What does it say? It says, you were dead in sin, lost in sin, following after the devil, under the wrath of God. Verse 4, but what? But God. But God. But God, being rich in mercy, which means pity and sorrow for a person in distress and helping them out of their pain. God being rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. God, because of his love, because of his grace, because of his mercy, saved you. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times as Christians, we put ourselves in the decisive place. I was smart enough to recognize the truth. I was committed enough to obey the truth. I was strong enough to do the right thing. When Paul put salvation squarely on God, I was not strong enough. I was not smart enough. Are you kidding me? I was dead in sin. I was hostile to God. Paul says more than once, I didn't even have the ability to get it right. But God, because of his love, mercy, and grace, saved me. And he saved you. Now that's important. It's important to get the graciousness and love and mercy of God if we want to have a Christian family. And we'll see why that is shortly. Number 2, turn over to Philippians chapter 3, please. Philippians chapter 3. In Philippians chapter 3, here's what Paul says about his personal relationship with Jesus. Philippians 3 and verse 8. Paul said, more than that, Philippians 3:8, I count all things. Now, how many things does he mean by all things? How many things do you think that means? Most of them? Some of them? I count all things to be loss. That means a debit, a harm, a distraction, a problem. He says everything in the world is a loss in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. He doesn't say knowing a doctrine. He doesn't say knowing theology. He doesn't say knowing a fact. He doesn't say being able to explain Trinitarian doctrine or the incarnation. He says, I know a person. I know him. Knowing Christ, Jesus, my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things and count them but rubbish, so that I may gain Christ. Verse 9, and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own derived from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, a person, the righteousness which comes from God on the basis of faith. Now notice verse 10, that I may know him, a person. A Christian is a man or a woman who by the grace of God now has a personal relationship with Jesus. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death. Paul says, I don't just want baby Jesus. I don't just want nice Jesus. I don't just want good teacher Jesus. I don't just want social reformer Jesus. I want all of Jesus in a personal relationship. Not that I just want to be a church member, a church attender in a sound congregation. Not that. That's important, but not that. I want to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. In our families, what are we teaching our children about a relationship with Jesus? What are we teaching our children about what is important for their lives? It seems like every time I see an article about training up children in the way they should go, the emphasis or sometimes the only thing that's discussed is whether you have them in church. That's important. And we're going to talk a lot about the church this weekend because it is essential. But do we understand that there's more to raising up Christian children than being sure that they're in church? There's more than that. Being a Christian is about having a relationship with the person of Jesus. And then finally, what is a Christian? 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 18. What is a Christian? A Christian who is a person who is daily being transformed into the image of Christ. Paul talks about unbelievers in this passage who, whenever they hear the gospel, there's just something between them and God and they can't get past it, and it's like a veil over their heart. Look at verse 18, 2 Corinthians 3:18. But we all, believers, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image. What is a Christian? A person who daily beholds the Lord in a personal relationship and becomes more and more like Him. You ever see those posts on social media where people grow to look like their dogs? You ever see that? People grow to look like their dogs. I mean, there's a lot of dog owners out there, aren't there? If you have that dog long enough, sooner or later, you two are going to start looking like each other. I hate to tell you, that's just the way that happens. I hope that it's like from you to them. Well, some of you could stand a little improvement, but I hope it's not from them to you. But we just know this. Even couples who have been married for a long time, guess what happens? They start to look like each other. Ladies, I bet you're wishing you'd have thought twice, aren't you? Right about now, you're like, well, maybe not. But it happens. And when you spend time in the presence of the Lord, you naturally begin to look like Him. That's a Christian. Now, what does all of that have to do with the family? I want to take each of those just for a moment and apply those to the family. If you are a Christian, if you are a believer, and you have been saved by the grace, love, and mercy of God, your job in your family is to pay forward to your family members the grace, love, and mercy that God has shown to you. That's your job. You have been given the grace, love, and mercy of God unconditionally, undeservedly. But too often, we're like the unforgiving servant who was forgiven $1 million debt by his master. And then when he found somebody who owed him $10, he was unwilling to forgive. Too often in our families, that's exactly the way that we are. That's why I said at the beginning, it is essential that we understand how God has forgiven us. The grace that you have received, the mercy that you have received, that is now your job to pass on to your family. How many family difficulties would be resolved? How many issues would never come up? How many difficulties would be avoided if you and I and our families would share the grace and love and mercy of God with our families? How many problems would be reduced, eliminated, if we were more gracious and loving and merciful? My wife was an instrument, was a divine instrument in this sort of thing. I used to be pretty grumpy. I used to be really angry. I had a lot of anger for a lot of reasons, and I was pretty grumpy, and I didn't always deal with people the way that I should, and my family normally got the brunt of that, right? Because you don't want to be a jerk out in public, but you go home, and then it's like, they can't go anywhere, so, and I would do some of that. And my wife finally, one day my wife said to me, "Do you use up all of your niceness on everybody else so that you have none to give me when you get home?" And of course, I told her, no, that wasn't it. And I fought her on that for a while, but she was right. She was right. Very often, our families are the last ones. So I want to take just a moment, and I want to get very specific about how we as family members can show grace, love, and mercy to our family. I want to begin with husbands, right? Because we're the big shots, right? We're the leaders. We're the head of the home, right? We get the recliner and the remote, and we get all the authority, right? And so if we're the big shots, then we need to start with us. Husbands, you need to give to your wives the grace and mercy and love that God has given to you. You need to be gracious toward your wife in the imperfections, not that she has any, but on the off chance that at some point she gets one. You need to share with her the grace and mercy and love that God has given you about her imperfections. She doesn't keep a perfect house. She doesn't deal with the children perfectly. You don't get home from work and she's like June Cleaver. Young people, ask your grandparents. I don't have time right now. But she's like June Cleaver, pearls and a dress and heels, and supper is on the table, and the kids are cleaned and dressed, and she's sane. You come home and she's lost it. Her hair is crazy. She got tears running down her face. Blouse is torn. Kids are hanging from the lights. Dog is gone. We don't know where the dog went. Dog's gone. House looks like a hurricane came through, right? And then we just let them have it. We can be so hard on our wives about these imperfections, or maybe, with social media, it has always been the case for our women, our girls, that society gives them a standard of looks and physical fitness and those types of things that next to nobody can live up to. It's always been that way. And now we have social media. And women already are made to feel so less than. And then we husbands, say something like, "Well, you're not going to wear that, are you?" I mean, it's not exactly, flattering or whatever. What? Right, but we've got to share with them the grace and love and mercy of God. Husbands, we've got to make sure that we're understanding about emotional differences, personality differences. They're just different, and they're supposed to be. If they weren't any different, what did God do? God looked at Adam in the garden, and he said, "What? That ain't good. That guy, he's a bachelor. Look at the way he lives. Look at his house. Look at the way he eats. It's terrible. Look at that guy. He's terrible by himself. He needs somebody." And he gave them a woman, not another man who's just like him. He gave him a woman to shore up and improve his weaknesses. That's the point. But then we look at our wives and we get aggravated. I don't know why she just can't be calmer. I don't know why she can't be less emotional. I don't know why she can't be this or that. Because that's how God made her. She's supposed to be that way. And we need to be gracious about that. We need to be loving and merciful about that. typically, the only thing I can do is speak in generalities. And I know that that's going to offend somebody. I apologize. I don't mean to do that. But typically, women want a little more sharing and guys want a little less sharing, by which I mean no sharing at all. Or typically, that's the way that works, right? It's the way God made us. My daughter is at ECU, about to finish up, become a 5th grade teacher. God help her, a 5th grade teacher. She's nuts. She's absolutely crazy. But she's at ECU. Her best friend from college has finished. She moved away. She's coming back for a weekend. This weekend, they're going to hang out. 2 girls hanging out. I said, what do you got planned? She said, we need to plan anything. We're going to sit and talk the entire time. That's all we're going to do is just talk, late into the night. Guys are like, let's go fishing. Let's play video games. And we don't have to say a word the entire time. We can sit there and push buttons or cast, I don't fish, whatever, rods, reels, whatever that is. We can sit in a deer stand and hunt, and nobody has to say anything. And women are like, we don't need a plan. We're just going to talk. We need to be patient with that. We need to be gracious with that. We need to be loving about. That's the way God made them. And it's supposed to be that way. But wives, I have to tell you, same thing with you. You got to show some grace. Yes, the husband is supposed to be the leader. They're never going to get all of it right. They're just not. Only a few of us do that. Most of them are not. Yours is not. They're not going to get it right. But you know, there are a lot of men out there who aren't doing it at all. There are a lot of men out there who are not leading at all. If you have a man at home who's trying to lead, give him grace and understanding for the mistakes that he makes, if he ever makes them. Understand that he doesn't want to talk about his feelings as much. He just doesn't. Be understanding about that and leave him alone. No, I'm kidding about that. Don't do that. Be careful, husbands and wives, about bringing up past failures, past mistakes, dredging things up from the past, right? The wife said she couldn't stand her husband anymore because every time they argued, he got historical. Somebody said, what do you mean? Don't you mean hysterical? She said, no, historical. He brings up everything I ever did. We can't do that. We have to leave those things in the past and be gracious and merciful. Parents, my son is here. I hesitate to talk about parents being gracious to children when he's here, but I'm going to do it anyway for the rest of you. Parents need to give grace to our kids. We need to give grace to our kids. That emotional immaturity is unavoidable. It's unavoidable. You can't expect a child, a young person whose brain isn't fully formed yet. I think for girls, it's probably like 15. For boys, it's like 35. But you can't expect your children to have this emotional maturity that would make everything so much easier. They're just not going to have it because it's impossible. You cannot expect your children to have your perspective. You say to your kids, look, you don't understand where I'm coming from. Of course they don't. They've never been there. I'm 58. And sometimes I will say to my kid, not very often, because my kid's very easy to get along with, usually, sometimes, when I'm asleep. But I'll say to my kids, look, you just don't understand. Of course they don't. They've never been here. They have no experience. So we've got to give them some grace and mercy. Children, you've got to give your parents a break. You just have to. Children have got to be gracious with their parents. We will mess it up. We will make mistakes, sometimes badly. You've got to be gracious with that. You've got to understand being a parent. before we had kids, so my oldest son is 28. My oldest son is 28. Before we had kids, I knew everything there was to know about parenting. I would see parents with these ill-behaved kids, and I'd be like, I know what I'd do about that. I could fix that. I could handle that before I had kids. Then we had kids. And I went from having all the answers to having none of them. Being a parent is hard. They tell you before you have them, gonna be hard. They don't tell you because they can't. How hard to be a parent. So hard. I've been a parent for 28 years, but I have never been a parent of a 28-year-old who's married with 2 kids, a 25-year-old about to graduate college and start working, a 23-year-old moving up in his company in a serious romantic relationship. I've never been that parent. You see what I'm saying? I've never been that parent. Whatever stage your family is in, your parents have never been that parent. They've never been that before. So of course they're going to mess it up. Of course they're going to get it wrong. Give them some grace. They've never been here before. These decisions and rules. I remember my father died when I was 7. He was 44. He died of a heart attack. I'm an only child. That will become obvious as the weekend moves forward. And my mother had the entire weight of fathering, mothering, money, working, housekeeping, decisions, discipline, all of that on her. And I used to wonder, why can't she get it right? Why does she make these decisions that don't make any sense? Children, you must give your parents grace. You will not understand until you get there how tiring it is to be a parent. To work all day and come home and have the entire weight of responsibility of everything at the house is on you. And your homework, and your questions, and your whining, and your crying, and all of that. Years ago, I had a lady, she was a single mother. She had a teenage son, just like my situation when I was a kid. So she thought I might be able to, she's having some trouble with her son. She wanted me to talk to him. So I went over there one day, and I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, she makes me do housework when I get home from school before she gets home from work. She makes me do stuff, clean stuff, before she gets home. And I don't like that. I don't want to do that. So she's got to work all day. And then he gets home before she does, and she wants him to do some housework." I said, trying to get some empathy, I said, "Why do you think she wants you to do that? Why do you think she's asking you to do that?" He said, "I don't know. I think because she's lazy." I said, "We're going to keep that between us because I don't want to have to do a funeral this week. We're not going to share that you said that." But children have got to understand just how difficult it is to be a parent and give some grace. So the grace, mercy, and love of God. A Christian is also a person that has a personal relationship with Jesus. As a family, the goal of your family ought to be your family having a personal relationship with Jesus. That should be the identity of your family. What is your family's identity? What is your family known for? If someone were to observe your family for a month, I know, horrifying, creepy, but just work with me. So if somebody were to observe your family for a month and watch where you went, what you did, what you talked about, what your priorities were, how you spend your money, and then they had to answer the question, what's their identity? Who are they as a family? What would they say? What is your family? You know, some families are sports families. Nothing wrong with sports. I love sports more than I should. Nothing wrong with sports. But some families are a sports family. That's who they are. Some families are academic families. What we care about in this family is that you get good grades so you can go to a good school to get a prestigious degree. That's what we're about. Some families are career families. What our family is about, you get a good job, the best job you can get, make the most money you can. Some families are about things. Bigger TV, bigger boat, bigger car, more jet skis, all that stuff. What I'm asking you is to be honest and to answer the question, what is your family's identity? Our goal needs to be that our family is known for seeking a personal relationship with Jesus. That needs to be who we are. We don't want to draw too hard a line between what is sacred and secular, but you're not going to do that without spiritual habits, studying the Bible, praying, and being involved in church. One of the most dangerous, we'll talk about dangers to our children, particularly, Lord willing, later in the weekend. One of the biggest dangers facing the church today is this idea that you can be a Christian in every way that you ought to be without the church. You don't need the church. You don't need to go to church. You don't need to be part of the church. You can be as good a Christian as a person can be. You don't need the church. It's a lie. You can't be spiritual without the church because the church is the temple of the Holy Spirit. You can't do it. What is your involvement in church? What is your involvement in spiritual habits? Paul said, what I want is a personal relationship with Jesus. You don't get a close relationship without spending time together. If the only contact I had with my wife was 3 hours a week and a brief chat before we ate and before we went to bed, we would have not much of a relationship. But that's about the sum total of a lot of people's pursuit of God. 3 hours in church, little chat before I eat, little chat before bed, and that's it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Won't be a Christian family that way. Finally, undergoing a daily transformation into the image of Jesus. What does it look like for a family to be daily transformed into the image of Jesus? It happens through prayer, study, and church. That's how it happens. What does it look like? So I know I'm getting toward the end of my time, and I'm not going to take too long with this, but I just want to talk about this for a moment. There's three things quickly that I want to mention to you. What does it look like for a family to look like Jesus? Number one, making sacrifices for each other. It's not all about you. It's about me. It's not all about you. It can't be all about what you want. It can't be all about how you want things. Jesus lived sacrifice from the moment He left heaven till he came to the earth in poverty, until he died on the cross, a horrific, horrible death. Jesus was about sacrifice. We have to be in our homes if we're to be a Christian family. Secondly, constant, open, and honest communication. When you look at Jesus, one of the things that comes through as you examine the life of Jesus is the close personal relationship he had with his Father. Right? They were very close to each other. They were as one, Jesus said. That happens in a family only through constant, open communication. Family time must be family time. It must be. Family time must be jealously guarded. The only way a family can have a close relationship with one another is by spending quality time together. And you spell quality T-I-M-E. It's time. You can't do it any other way. And, I'm not going to harp on screens. Goodness knows everybody else does that, and everybody's tired of hearing it. But screens are a problem. That's all I'm going to say. Or we ate a quick meal, everybody scattered to their bedrooms, to their own TV. Or everybody's got 15 activities going on and we barely see each other. You can't have a close family that way. And I know, I had 3 kids. We were always in sports, it's hard. But it has to happen for us to be the right kind of family. Finally, to serve one another and to serve others. Service must be the hallmark of a family if they want to be a Christian family. The home is the first and most important training school for service. Kids got to be taught to pick their stuff up. They're learning how to serve. Kids have to be taught how to help mom and dad with what they're doing. They're learning how to serve. The home is the first and most important service training school. And then we must serve as families. I can't tell you how I felt tonight. And I know meeting in a place like this has got challenges, it's got advantages. I don't want to get into all that, because I know people have different views, whatever. But when we were talking to the Bachmillers, and at some point they said, we got to leave a little early. We got to go set the chairs up. When I was a kid and we established a congregation in the town that we lived in, a few of us, we rented a place, the Community Workshop. It was a place where physically handy and mentally handicapped people had a job. They gave them jobs. And so we rented a room for our church services. And every Saturday night, myself, my mother, and 2 of our friends got done with supper, cleaned up the dishes, and drove down to the Community Workshop to set up those chairs. I hated it at the start. I hated that. Hated that. Now I look back on that and I realize what a service mindset that instilled in me. How valuable was that experience? I would not trade that for anything. And I'm not saying y'all need to stay here so you can keep putting chairs. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the home is the place where we learn to serve. And parents have to train their children in serving each other and others as well. Well, we're going to sing our invitation song in just a moment. It'll be up on the screen, I assume, is where we're going to do that. We started tonight with the grace and love and mercy of God. I think as Christians, a lot of times we sort of have the attitude that grace is what saves initially, but then grace sort of doesn't have a lot to do with going forward. Like grace, I was saved by grace, but then I moved on and got into the Christian life. We need to understand that grace is not the beginning of the Christian life, it is the sum total of the Christian life. The grace of God is how we will do everything we need to do. The grace of God is what will work in our families to get everything done that needs to get done. And here's why I say that. Because I have never heard lessons on the Christian family that did not in some way make almost everybody present feel like dirt. I've just almost never heard that. I remember a friend of mine, one time they were going to another church, and there was a preacher there who was, he and I are a lot different. He did things differently than I do. But she said that they went to church on a Mother's Day, and he was going to preach a Mother's Day sermon. Now, what would you like out of a Mother's Day sermon? Ladies, what would you like out of a Mother's Day sermon? I'd like some encouragement. I'd like some help. I'd like a pat on the back. I'd like to be made to feel better about what I'm trying to do. She said, I left that Mother's Day sermon and have never felt lower and worse and more horrible at my job than I did after that Mother's Day sermon. So many times when we talk about these things, we just go away feeling worse. I don't want that to happen this weekend. I don't want that to happen. You need to understand, whatever your situation, your husband, wife, you're single, you're a child, you're a grandparent, whatever your situation and whatever you need to be doing in it, you will do it by the grace of God. God will help you to do it. You can't do it otherwise. Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and in verse 10, by the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace toward me did not prove vain. I labored more than any of them, he said, yet not I, but the grace of God with me. It'll be by grace. And that's what we're going to emphasize as we go through the weekend. This evening, if you're not a Christian, you need the grace of God. This evening, if you're not a Christian, the Bible says you are dead in sin. You have no life. A dead person can't raise themselves. You're lost, following after the devil, indulging desire, condemned and under the wrath of God. The only thing that can save you is the grace of God. If you are not a Christian, we would love to share with you how that happens. If you are a Christian and you're struggling, you're trying, but you're failing. It's difficult. It's challenging. You need help. This is God's hospital for sick people. The church is not a wax museum of the perfect. The church is a hospital for people who are sick and in need of help. And if that's you tonight, for whatever reason, we would love to help you. If you're not a Christian and would like to talk about what to do about that, if you are a Christian and struggling and you need help tonight, please make sure that you see someone after church tonight, or you're welcome to come forward and take a seat on the front as we stand and sing.